Okay, so welcome to the Oxytocin training. This is the training for Great Behavior Breakdown certified instructors that will take place this webinar with whatever information or material, whether we are adding to the material, we are not adding to the material, or we're just going to go over some basics. Every year there will be a series of the same webinar. I think at some point I was thinking that it would be really good just to run a webinar series of the Great Behavior Breakdown program in and of itself so that everybody has a reference point. So tonight we're adding the oxytocin to our curriculum. Let's talk a little bit about what oxytocin is. Susan Kachinka says that oxytocin response allows us to feel attachment, love, trust, and generosity. What I want you to imagine is that I'm born or I'm in the womb, all of these things are happening, I don't feel safe. If I cry, I'm not getting fed. If I need to be changed and I cry and no one's coming, or I'm in an area where there's a lot of violence going on and it's not safe, what my brain is then going to tell me is, uh-oh, we can't produce something called oxytocin. What we need to produce is a little bit more cortisol. So my brain at that point is going to identify the environment, it's going to identify what I need to survive, and it's going to start producing the chemicals and the hormones that are going to help me to survive in the best way that I possibly can. So I once heard this statement that children who are born into trauma, one of the ways in which they will cope is by owning that there's something wrong with them, because if they have to see that there's something wrong with their parent and they can't attach, they can't bond, they can't connect to them, what they got to do is they've got to make it about them, because if I can't connect to the person who's supposed to take care of me, then I might as well just go ahead and die. It makes no sense for me to survive. It makes no sense for me to keep going. So hearing that statement, and it really rang true for what I see, and then looking at all of this research, I said, wow, not only is it, some sort of a feeling, but this is cemented within our brain at a whole nother level. So that oxytocin is a peptide that functions both as a hormone and a neurotransmitter. So what we have is a chemical that's called dopamine, and dopamine makes it feel good for us to be in a relationship. Dopamine is kind of like a natural kind of heroin. It kind of excites you, and so we want to be connected, and we'll create and we'll seek that connection. And then oxytocin is the thing that creates that bond. It's all about bonding, and it's all about attachment, it's all about trust. And what Susan Kachinka says is that, by means of oxytocin, what we truly experience is love. We experience that oxytocin rush as love. It's our role in our system is widespread. This includes the hypothalamus, the amygdala, the hippocampus, the brainstem, the heart and uterus, regions of the spinal cord, which regulate the autonomic nervous system, especially the parasympathetic nervous system. So oxytocin then is involved in every one of those responses. When I get triggered and I'm scared, we talk all about moving into a place of aggression. When we look at aggression, we look at a child who's defiant. We talk about the amygdala hijacking and how the amygdala is saying, uh-oh, everything is a threat. So all of a sudden my amygdala is saying, uh-oh, everything is a threat. Then I get an oxytocin rush that comes in on top of that cortisol rush and begins to calm, and it begins to soothe it. So oxytocin then is taking care of all of these things. When we talk about chronic stress the chronic stress hinders the healthy and the natural production of oxytocin in the brain. So experiences, people like Bruce Lipton, he states, and most of the research will turn around and state that 80% of all illnesses, Bruce Lipton believes that 98% of the illnesses can be attributed to the stress in the autonomic nervous system, which is a really powerful statement. We typically, with stress, will associate things like, heart attacks, strokes, maybe diabetes and some of those things. And a lot of times we associate a lot of these illnesses to genetics. What, in my opinion anyway, it seems like you have that genetic predisposition, all of a sudden you have all of this stress. And they are doing, Australia just came out with some research, I'll see if I can get my hands on it, that was looking at, let me see if I can find where the noise is and mute that out. If you have noise in your background, press *6 and mute yourself, because I can't find it.
Maybe I'll do a couple, but one of them probably they canceled the session because there weren't enough kids attending. And
hello? I can't find it. I knew I found it the other night for the first time. I was like, oh, look at that, I can find it.
Yeah.
Give me a second. Oh. Okay, I found it. So, I don't even know what I was saying. So if we're under chronic stress, it hinders our ability to relax, it causes prolonged anxiety, it causes emotional overwhelm, and it causes depression. So when we don't have a good oxytocin response, all of these anxiety, the being overwhelmed, feeling depressed, all of those are consequences of not producing the oxytocin. But here is the major thing about oxytocin. Oxytocin is something that our brain learns to produce. So every time we get that soothing, every time we get what we need, that oxytocin then comes in and creates the soothing for us. And so if I don't have enough of that experience, I don't have enough of the repetition. You think about adoptive parents going through consistent behaviors with their child again and again and again. They're absolutely exhausted. And so now I've been ineffective, I feel hopeless, I get up and I say, okay, here we're going to go through another morning. It's another morning and my kiddo's going to yell at me. I'm not going to get them out the door. And, I don't even want to do it. And so I feel all of this angst and I feel all this anxiety just even walking towards my kid. When I have that repetition of that type of an interaction, what I do is I condition the response of my child. My child is then conditioned to produce more cortisol to say, when mom comes to wake me up, it's time to be stressed out again. And so in that conditioning, my cortisol goes up, my oxytocin is down, and there is nothing there to help me calm and soothe. We had a kiddo in our group homes that spent, and I've talked a lot about her in our trainings, but she spent 9 years, almost more than half of her life going through all of these residential centers. And in the residential centers, they would go in and she would act up, and then they would jump in and they would restrain her. And it was a consistent thing. It was how she learned to get calm. So what I do is I increase my cortisol. I go into freeze, fight, and flight, and I just keep outpouring and outpouring and outpouring until my brain just can't produce it anymore and it has to shut down. And so by the time I've been restrained for a few minutes, my brain then has gone and it shut down. So there is nothing, there's been no repetition for me to learn to produce that oxytocin, for my hippocampus to get into place. And so we had her, and I swear that the first home that we placed her in, when she looked in the refrigerator, instead of being able to be calm to say, like, are we going to get food or is there going to be food, she assumed that there was going to be no food. She tore every single drawer out of every single dresser apart. She pulled everything off of the wall. She smashed the kitchen table, ketchup, mustard, you name it, all over the walls, completely destroyed it. And we went through this series with her for a while without restraining her, letting her know that she is safe, letting her know that she is okay. And all of a sudden we saw bigger spans of 3 months and 6 months and 9 months. And then I remember one time I said to her, she was about to go up, and now she looks like one of those kids that are manipulating her way through it. And she's looking at me, and she's kind of got a smile on her face, and she's looking like she's like beginning to push the shelf a little bit. And she's beginning to push it. And I turned around and I said, honey, I said, did you know, I said, that when we get really upset that moms take us out and we go and we talk about what's going on, and that's what mothers and daughters just do. They just do those things. And she looked at me with her eyes like to say, huh, okay. She went in her room, grabbed her pocketbook, and walked out the door and waited by the car.
Mm.
Because through that conditioning, she began to learn that she is safe, that she can get to a calm state. There was no way for her brain to actually jump in and begin to help her cool down.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys have any questions, please just jump in. And for those of you that joined us a little bit late, I have a couple of you on. I have a couple of you unmuted because there's noise in the background, and you probably just don't even know that you're allowed to do that. So I'm going to try and take it off, and if there's too much noise, then I'm going to just mute you again. Laura, are you there? No,
here.
no.
Can you hear me?
Lori, I can
Are
hear
you
you.
asking for Laura?
No, Lori.
Oh, Laura's here. Yeah, I just had myself muted because I have family around.
Okay. Pamela, can you hear me? Pamela? Okay. So parenting oxytocin. What the research finds is that oxytocin levels are reproduced in those with autism, depression, things like obsessive-compulsive, PTSD, schizophrenia, and other related disorders. One of the things that I was going to say before then, when I forgot what I was talking about, was that some of the research that they're finding, a study that just came out from Australia, is finding that oxytocin is actually a means of treating cancer and making cancer disappear, which is really amazing. I mean, if you think about the impact that that has, that cancers are produced or do create themselves when you are that stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really incredible. Well, okay, and so oxytocin decreases persistent fear, repetitive behaviors. I don't know how many of you see kids that perseverate on things on a consistent basis. It's like, I got to have that DSI, and if I don't have that DSI, then I'm just not going to be okay, and everybody else has one, and I don't have the coolest sneakers, and so they really get stuck on these, and enough that it really drives parents crazy, and parents are going, we just stop. You're not getting it. End the conversation. I'm the parent. I said so. And being able to move in and say, I know, man, I could just imagine you with those new sneakers on, and you would just be like the coolest kid in the whole world. And I get how bad you want to have those sneakers, because you know what? I really wanted to have those sneakers too. And so you can relate, and it creates that soothing. It creates that feeling of my feelings are okay. It doesn't mean that I'm going to get it, but my feelings are okay. Because then all of a sudden I learn that my feelings behind it aren't okay, so there's something wrong with me, so I get more stressed out, and there's not even anybody honoring me, so then it really feels like my needs are not going to get met, which can tap into all of that adoptive stuff, because if my needs aren't going to be met, it's not really about the